Welcome to Technique Friday. Now this is the last of my basic colour blending lessons, and I've focused on the primary colours because those are the three colours that are really important for mixing all other colours. Now as we go through various techniques in the future, obviously further colour blending techniques will come in, but today I'm going to focus on a few extra little colour combinations at the end, and also a new colour blending technique that you may not have used before. So as I have in all previous other lessons, I'm going to swatch my paint, and I'm going to fast forward through this, but I've already written them out today because I've just decided that I'm going to be more time efficient. Less time to film. Okay, so as I swatch all these, we have the golden fluids here, we have Montmartre dimensionals here, we have Jo Sonja here, we have Dina Weekly paint here, and I have one Liquitex yellow. So I don't have a massive range of yellows, and it's funny because there are a couple of particular yellows that I do really like in all brands, and I tend to use them for blending a lot. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I've got a few different types of yellows, and you can see how they really vary. I've got 3 different types of Naples, and I've got my fingers on each of them here. Now these two are reasonably similar, but one is more orange and one is more pale yellow. And this Naples, which is the golden Naples, that's almost positively got some, raw sienna in it. It seems to have almost a brown hue. And what I call the true yellows are like the Hansa yellow medium, the medium yellow, the cadmium yellow, and probably this Liquitex cadmium yellow light. And the Dina Weekly closely follows, and then you've got a deep yellow, which I consider a light orange, and the Turner's yellow, which definitely has a more orange hue as well. Even the flesh tone is quite lemony yellow, and lighter again than the Naples, and quite nice for blending. The poster paint yellow is very translucent. In fact, all of these yellows, with the exception of probably the Naples and the flesh, are extremely translucent. The reason that the Naples and the flesh have more white in it, and they have a heavy sediment white in them, so more like a zinc white in them. Okay, so having a look at the yellows, I'm actually not going to pick a true primary yellow for this exercise of blending today. I've decided that I feel that we know what the primaries will pretty much do. And what I'm going to do is just go with a Naples as my blending yellow today. The reason I'm going to do that is it's going to be extremely different. Now I'm going to put a yellow column over here, and that's going to be to show you a few different examples with some cadmium yellow. So I'll show you the difference between some of these columns and a little bit with the cadmium yellow. But my test today, control one, will be Naples. Now, Naples is my favourite yellow. The reason it is because it blends incredibly well with all the colours that I absolutely adore. and it is my most used yellow by a country mile. Now I will write down all the columns that I'm going to pop in here, and I'll be back. Okay, so I've got a list. I've got the purples, and I'm starting with that first because it's the complementary colour, and it's the only colour that's actually going to make a brown. But it'll be interesting when we put them with red purples and blue purples. And I have a number of different shades of purple here to give you an idea. I've got a whole heap of different blues, and I've thrown in a couple of different odd blues. So I've got a colony blue that's got some green in it, and a French blue that's very grey. I've also got a whole bucket load of reds and magentas, and a whole different types of greens. So if you have a look at the green and blue spectrum and phthalo greens, I have quite a different collection, and there are varying shades of yellow in all of those. It'll be interesting to see the huge variation in colour with that yellow. And then of course I have the teals, and I've thrown in a phthalo turquoise for that as well, to show you some really quite different tones. And then at the end I'm going to chuck a blue, a green, a red and a purple down here with a cadmium yellow. So this Jo Sonia cadmium yellow. The rest of the controlled tests are going to be done with this Naples yellow, and then I'm going to throw in some white at the end. Okay, so you can see the huge difference that using a yellow like the Naples yellow makes when you colour me, when you're doing your colours. Now, the complementary colours are the big surprise, because the pigments of the yellow were not dominated or mixed equally with the yellow. But when you get down to the colour that was the same tint, it forms a light beige, and that's a shadow colour for skin tone. It lets you know that there's a whole wide. This is why Naples yellow is most likely my favourite yellow for blending, because I love working in these beautiful muted colours. And you can create a whole different set of tones by using a different kind of yellow. You don't always have to use a big primary yellow. So I'm going to use some light colours with this primary yellow. So the green, I'm going to use a light green. So you can see down here the colours that I'm picking. The red, I'm going to use the primary red because it's just that hint of pink. And the purple, I'm going to use the lilac that produced the flesh tone in the first column. Now let's have a look and see what they do when we decide that we're going to substitute cadmium yellow for Naples. So you know what's happened with the others. And as the blue comes in, it creates a bluer green, but over here it's yellow, so you've got the yellow to the blue spectrum. Now we've already got a green. Let's just lay that out and add the yellow in. So there you see the after and the before. And it's quite a nice limey green. I really like that kind of thing. And then with this red, it creates a real orange, whereas over here none of these are real oranges. So you get a lovely, beautiful orange with the red. I'm just putting all my loose paint onto some scratch paper. And here we go with the only one that is complementary, and let's have a look and see what a stronger yellow does. So the yellow now is almost overpowering, but providing a very muddy neutral tone, like almost an ochre yellow to that yellow. And there's only a little bit of yellow in there, but it was completely overpowering and not in the same tint as that, but is definitely going into that neutral zone. And of course the white down the bottom, like I said, have your white first, add the tiniest amount of tint, because every time that I start with a little drop, have a look how bright that is, or how much white I need to tone it down. Alright, so I'll come back and I'll explain what colours were what. But I need to go wash my hands because of course they are covered, and not all of these paints are safe for you to have on your skin for long periods of time. So I'm going to go and wash my hands and I'll be back. Okay, so these are the colours that I used to mix this first row. So you can see that the top three reds, the top three purples, sorry, absolutely dominated the yellow. But this one here, you can see it's much paler and very much in the same tone. So tone on tone is going to produce the neutral. If they're unbalanced, they won't. For example, if I was to pop this in here, let's just pop it here with a bright yellow, something dark like a medium. Right, there's the two colours there. Now let's just mix them up. much, much different. It's forming a really beautiful kind of umber. Because, of course, that particular purple is based in red. So your brown is going to be a red brown and not a blue brown. Now, the blue browns are the ones that look the darkest and the muddiest. The red browns look really, really vibrant. And I'm really loving that brown. It's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? You can really see how beautiful and rich and vibrant that is. And that's when you decide to use something that's similar in tone. So I really encourage you to play around with your colour matching and colour blending. I wanted to show you something a little bit different today to see how these particular colours, how that entire palette has changed just because I used a Naples yellow. And then you see the vibrancy of the colours down the side when you're using a cadmium, and you start to get an idea of the massive range of colour palette you have when you think about how to create different things with some of the different paints. That's why I have 3 Naples yellows, because for me Naples is my favourite. Now it may not be for you, but you think about the tones that you can get on an art journal page when you start with some gesso and you start pouring some of these colours all in together, and the beautiful tones that you can get blending out to the darks at the edges, or vice versa, whites on the edges and lights on the edges into the dark epicenter of the middle of a journal page. And that's the idea here. Now, with yellows, when I look at shading yellows, and I'm just going to turn this pad on its side and push it down so that I've got the only clear space left on the pad. And I'll just zoom it in a little bit, just a little bit. So when I look at shading yellows, and what you've seen how yellows are used to lighten reds, and they do the same with oranges. But if you were to shade a yellow, you could obviously use darker shades of yellow. So you could put your light yellow in. So say I started off with a light yellow. And let's just get the yellow out of the tube. So you get a light yellow. And you're doing a sun, right? So imagine this is a sun. And we've got this sun, and we've got the middle of it, and it's looking lovely, right? But even though the sun really doesn't have shadows, we're just going to start looking at lights and shadows. So let me just show you a few things. So if you wanted to make that light, you could add the tiniest hint of red. So if you wanted to make it dark, get it right, Peter. And I'm like literally only got a tiny little bit on my brush, but you have to do this when it's red, when it's wet. A little bit of water helps. See how that's blending in? Quite nicely. Right? And you've got a little bit of a blend happening there. And say you wanted to blend it a little bit more. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of that brown that I just made. Just a hint. And I'm just going to go around the edges here. Right, and it's pretty much all off my brush now. Now I'm going to blend it again. I'm just going to sit there and pop a little bit more in, right on the edge. And you can see now how the shadow is deepened. And if I wanted to, and see this is the sort of colour that's being made when you're blending. And it's interesting to see how, if I just bring that out and deepen it again. And so we're looking at the complementary colours then providing a really, really interesting colour palette. So say I was to just add in a little bit more yellow again, because, you know, I thought to myself, oh, there's probably a little bit too much yellow. Not enough yellow here. I've overdone it. So I go in and I blend over the top. And this is one of the tricks of blending, right? You go back in over the top with the colour that you started with, and you really start making that a seamless transition, so that it looks almost like you got your wax pastel out and you smudged it with your fingers and blended them all together while you were doing it. And so if you were to look at that now, and I'll just go in, right, you can see that that transition is really, really quite seamless. And if I really wanted to make a huge difference on that and really wanted to highlight the white, one, I could use a gesso, because a gesso has plaster in it, and so those particles make this. That's why gessos are primers, and you could just start adding in the white around the edge here, because of course light and dark have their opposites, and you really want to show that this is a 3D object. So we're starting to show that there's a real light source here, and this is all done when the paint is wet, semi-dry, and you really work it in with your brush. And you start to see now that this side is starting to lighten up. And if I want to really accentuate it, I can put a line around the edge, but I won't make it a perfect line. And this is one of the tricks, particularly in watercolour painting, where you put an edge around something, but you make it an unbroken line. Because we never want our things to be absolutely perfect. And when light hits something, it doesn't always make a perfect line. And it adds interest and curiosity to an image. So you can see that now, that the white is dotted around and it's not actually a straight line, and it kind of is making that sphere just look that little bit more shadowed and highlighted. And I've brought it in and lightened it up, and just adding in, and instead of using the white, I've used a gesso, because, you know, it will give a particular look that is hard to achieve with just white. So if I was to then blend a page, let's get the trusty page out. And I need to find that paper pad, because of course I put everything away. Right. Okay. So this week we're going to look at blending with some yellows, but we're also going to have a look at the toning of the yellows in a background. So I'm just going to put that there. I'm going to throw some white, because of course I'm a big one for having your layer, your first layer with your gesso tinted, because I'm essentially lazy and don't like to do more than one layer. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick. So here I am, I have some, they are flow acrylics. They're not fluid, but they're very transparent. This one's called transparent yellow oxide and transparent umber. Now umber is very much like that colour that we just made. Now I'm going to add that in here. Right? And I want you to see how that blends in. So let's get a little bit of water. And what I'm doing is starting out with the white down here because I will drag some of that yellow. And now I'm looking at the yellow, right? But I'm going to start picking up. And I'm scrubbing. And what it's done is completely deepened and changed that yellow. And if I really want to do some more, I add some more on top. And I scrub it in. And this is the beautiful transparent nature of transparent paints like Golden. That you can just blend it in as you're going and get yourself a gradient going into white. So now I'm going to clean off my brush and tip a bit more white on. And I'm going to take it down there this time. And I've got a damp brush, not really wet, but you want a little bit of wetness. And for me, it's about slightly this scrubbing motion. Now, some of these paints have dried really fast. And so we're going from a place of light, and we're scrubbing in to this dark. Until you're letting it go back into the light. And that's how you kind of going to grade it. Now obviously the focal point's down here. This is the shadow. So this could be a sunlight page, and I could do a whole page based on that whole background about the sun and the rays and whatever I thought to do, or I could layer over the top of it and then scratch through and have the yellow showing over the top. Who knows? I mean, often I will blend phthalo blues and turquoises into this. So let me just be bold now and show you what I mean by that. So let me just find a phthalo turquoise. And I'm just going to put that down in this green spot. So now I've changed the whole texture of how it is. Now I'm going to leave myself with a reasonably wet brush for this, because I'm wanting to reactivate. And I'm going to do that whole, this paint's not dry but it's not wet. So this wet brush is coming in. And you can just see how I'm now, with the almost dry brush, blending it into the top. And bringing that down and changing the hue of that colour. And now I can really scrub the colour in and really change the whole texture of that entire page. In one foul smooth, you know, one tiny dot of paint at the bottom now has given some fabulous and beautiful texture, and the way I've scrubbed the brush, you know, makes it look, you know, really like it's been bagged, a wool that's been bagged. So if I just go in and show you a bit of that texture, you can see a little bit of that texture now, and you saw that it was really easy to get, right? And how beautifully those colours blend. You know, anything with the predominance of blue in it, with the yellow, they're going to blend harmoniously and make new colours and just work together very well. Like I said, yellow is one of my favourite blending colours. I use it far more than I use white. And I use colours where I create colours out of like a yellow green like this, and then I'll add something like a flesh to it and dull it right down, and those particular colours then are almost like a Naples yellow. So even if you don't have a Naples yellow but you've got a real yellow limey green, you can start experimenting with that, with some, you know, flesh tones. If you've got some flesh tones, some unbleached titanium, because unbleached titanium is a beautifully awesome colour. And that's another lesson, I think, for a Technique Friday, about different ways that you can blend skin tones, which will be coming up in the future, I guess. Tell me if you want to hear about blending flesh tones and all the different things that you can do with that. So that concludes our basic colour blending series with the primaries. If any of you want to have a look at anything else to do with colour blending, you just leave the questions in my comments below this video, and I'll take them on board, and because this Technique Friday is all about what my viewers want. Okay, ciao for now. Learn something new today. It keeps you young.